If you start seeing an increase in a certain type of plan coming in the door, it means somebody down the street got out of network.
It's easy to open up your own billing company, which is a blessing and a curse. So
Correct.
That's why you have some bad players out there.
They have to watch the plans, the changes in the plans, as some of the Medicare Advantage have gone down in benefits.
The yearly benefit had changed dramatically. The lease networks just got so convoluted.
The plan your employer has chosen is part of a network that could change what we think it is financially. You have to do it slow and steady.
And we are back with another edition of Nobody Told Me That. And woo, insurance nerds. We are back with Colleen Huff, who is my fellow insurance nerd. What's up, Colleen?
How you doing, Teresa?
I'm excellent because you know what? People, you probably wanted to listen in on it, but she and I had a pregame where all we did was talk about insurance because that's what happened. And then we're like, oh, we should probably hit record on some of it.
Doesn't that happen every time we do one of these? We probably would have had 2 hours worth of stuff if we actually recorded all of it.
You know, when I saw your name come across on the appointment, I was like, I should have extended the time. So, Colleen, for the people who weren't lucky enough to hear you the first couple, I think you've been on 2 times now or something.
I think so.
If for people who haven't seen you speak, for people who haven't heard me talk about you and your book, who are you? What do you do? What's so insurance nerdy about you?
Everything. So seriously, I call myself the dental insurance coach, and that's because I'm one of those odd people who enjoy teaching and training those that are brand new to the insurance world, how to do it, how to enjoy doing it, and how to not make themselves crazy doing it, I think would be part of it. I've been in the field for 30 years, and I like to say I started actually on the insurance company end. I worked as a customer service rep for MetLife. I like to caveat of 30 years ago, not today, just saying, and had a classroom training. And so from there, because of a move, went into the practices, learned everything else the way we learn things in dental. On the job, here, go do this, figure it out. And after 21 years of managing practices and then 8 other years of insurance being insurance coordinator, front desk bookkeeper, assisting, you name it, started speaking and coaching, and here I landed. So had my first book come out last July, which was very exciting. Mm-hmm. And so I do some in-office training direct with practices. I've helped set up whole revenue cycles or rework them from single office to I just completed one for 4 practices and revamped their whole revenue cycle to teaching and speaking on the road, sometimes with you.
Yeah.
And,
this year a lot.
This year a lot. We're going to get sick of each other.
I know. Well, your book is called A Mouthful of Insurance. And I have not told you this, but I read the inscription that you put in there, and that meant a lot to me. So thank you. Okay. I just realized I never told you like how much that meant to me. So pick up the book, you guys, and I'll put a link in the show notes for it. And she's also got some pretty exciting stuff that she's got planned, which we'll talk about, that we'll put also in the show notes. So here's the thing. When you mentioned MetLife 30 years ago or whatever, because it's the same, for me, we've been doing this a long time. I don't think a lot of the new people out there can even conceive of a time when you would call the insurance company, talk to the rep, and you would laugh and joke with the rep, and they would teach you how to do your job. They would teach you what these clauses are. They would say, the next time you should do it this way and that way. And it wasn't someone who was just put in front of a flow chart, and it was somebody who really was so helpful. Do you remember those days?
Well, I was that person for 6 months, and I loved it. I honestly loved it. My husband said it was the best job ever. I got paid to talk, and I came home almost tired from talking, so I didn't talk his ear off. But the things that people don't understand is in that day, I had 3 months of classroom training to understand what I was talking about. Mm-hmm. And the problem now is, like you said, these are people that are just given a computer, they punch in a code. They don't have any understanding of that code. We weren't even allowed to touch a claim for the first month. Mm-hmm. We were taught all the codes, different aspects of it, about the insurance plans themselves, how they were broken down. Yeah. There was a time for probably a good 20 years when FedEx was still with MetLife. I could have told you all of those benefits because we had gone over them so much. Mm-hmm. But these reps now have had no training, most of them. Typically, they're outsourced to another country, and it's not the same. And so that's where the struggle for anybody who's new, like you said, a lot of people learned it from the reps.
Yeah, it's painful. Honestly, I would rather go to the portal. I would rather do chat. I actually will do anything I can to avoid calling.
Hmm.
Now, I have that luxury because, the accounts that I do work are from my old boss. They're not difficult and I can do it from home. But were I in the office, sometimes you need to pick up the phone and you need
Hmm.
to call. You can't just hope that it's going to be on the portal. You got to call. And then you're like, you are the 50th in line or whatever, and it's like, wow. So things have definitely changed. One thing I wanted to ask you about, so I'm going to ask you a lot of questions here. I hear on the road that it's been troublesome to manage all of the portals and all of the sites. And how have you advised your clients to, is it a master document with all the passwords? Is it a password manager? Is it just one person? How are you seeing? Because just the management of the portals
Yeah.
and passwords is like crazy.
I'm a big believer in the password managers. There's two particular that people lean towards that I've worked with. LastPass, but if you do the professional level, you do need to pay for it. Both are HIPAA compliant, but there's that extra level. And then the
Mhm.
other one is Unify. The nice part with any of that is, well, first off, the doctor's email has to be the setup with it, first off and
Yes.
foremost.
Yes.
And no offense to any office manager, insurance coordinator, I love all of you, but you're not always going to be there. And
Hmm.
so the doctor needs to set that up. It needs to go to a doctor's private email so that any changes can come from him or her. And it's nice because then if someone leaves, you just remove their ability and you change that password. The other thing is that way Mary changed a password and put it on the post-it note that then got thrown out and nobody knows the new one. Doesn't happen.
Yes, that does happen.
And like you said, you can work from home. A lot of these password portals are now making you change the password. They're forcing you into it every 3 months, whether you want
Hmm.
to or not. And
Yeah.
you can't just keep recycling smile 123 exclamation point, smile 123 asterisk. They will not allow that anymore. The biggest thing I'm seeing a problem happening is that two-step verification. And that hopefully the office has the ability for a text to come through to their phone number, but
Hmm.
that's one of the glitches I'm seeing happen. I don't know if you've heard, but I do know that some of the websites are starting to allow more than one sign up so that it can go to their personal phone number. You just have to, if that person leaves, eliminate that one.
Yeah, and it is a good idea to have it go to the office because even if you're working from home, if you have like access to like the Revenue Well or Solution Reach or whatever, you can see it and intercept
Mm-hmm.
that, for your multi-factor. But
Yep.
it's a problem. And so a lot of times, you and I advise the same, like the doctor is the one that has to
Mm-hmm.
own that whole thing. But what if they're away and you need to log in? And this is what we hear from our billing company friends, like, we have to figure out a better way on this. Unify has been great. I hear some good things about it, but the HIPAA compliance piece is something that I don't think a lot of people think about, that the password manager itself needs to be, HIPAA compliant too. So
Correct.
it's, boy, all the stuff we have to worry about. And so here's another question that comes from that. You and I were talking earlier about EFTs. What's the rumble on the street about EFTs, and how are your audiences feeling about it? Mine, I'll tell you, mine are split, and we can talk about
Mm-hmm.
that. Mine are split.
Sometimes the biggest barrier to the EFTs is the doctor themselves because maybe they started it, but they put it in with their regular bank account. And I'm a big believer in those EFTs should go into their own account so it's clean.
Yes, I
Yes, I
agree.
understand you can pull them out through QuickBooks and all this other stuff, but inevitably something gets missed because there's so many different ways those EFTs come in. So the doctors push back a lot because they say, oh, I'm not going to know how. And like we talked about, I'll have part of a course that I'll have online is going to train you how to set up those EFTs. When
Good.
I did it in the last practice I worked in, I had a doctor who was not big on them. I pushed her into it because I knew the efficiency of it. And I also knew it's where I can get paid faster. I want to make sure, and I know it's the trend. I'm going to date myself here. When I started at MetLife, electronic claims were new.
Yeah.
Paper claims were dot matrix printer, paper claims were the norm. Those of you that don't know what that is, go Google it if you're young enough to not know what dot matrix printer
And then
is.
laugh because
And
that's what we
then,
did.
yeah. Um, but I know when I was at MetLife, they wanted the electronic claims. That was top priority coming in the
Hmm.
door. And the same thing's happening with the EFTs. They want the EFTs, so they're going to pay that faster. So I think that from the setup, there's a lot of different ways you can do it. You just need to make sure that it's systematic and you're not missing things and letting it cut through the cracks, because I don't want to call an insurance after 30 days and find out they paid me 3 weeks ago and I missed it.
Yeah.
But the
Yeah.
doctors are some of the biggest pushback. And those of us that have been in the field a long time that are set in our ways
Hmm.
also kind of push it back and don't want to do it. Because I think it's no different than we went from paper claims to a sheet that I had to do my follow up on. It's that same, I
Yeah.
tell anybody that's hesitant with me, I look at them and go, listen, I remember my A to Z. And again, I'm dating myself here.
Hmm.
I remember my copy of my claims, and going from that to a report was tough, but it's the same idea. We have to move with the times.
Well, and the format of the ERAs has not been easy to read. And I know that's one thing. You and I are members of the National Association of Dental Plans. And, we sit in on some of these meetings. And on one of the meetings, they were like, well, we need more EFT uptake because what happened with Change Healthcare, is that
Hmm.
a lot of people started distrusting the
Right.
EFTs because they lost the ability to get paid, all that kind of stuff. And it was no fault of, the other carriers, but
Hmm.
when something happens like that, people go to checks because it's tried and true and all that stuff. And
Hmm.
so the EFTs, they're seeing people decide to move away from them. And I said to them, your ERAs are a mess. Like
Yep.
if I could read your ERAs, I'd be set for EFTs everywhere, but your ERAs are difficult. And like you said, if you lose one day of reconciliation, it's like a snowball effect. And that's another thing. So let's segue into something else because what I have seen, especially with the insurance section of revenue cycle growing, is
Hmm.
that it's not just one person that can handle it anymore. You and
Hmm.
I used to do insurance plus check people out, plus
Hmm.
occasionally assist, plus answer the
Hmm.
phones. And it's just not possible anymore. But
No,
even the insurance coordinator position, you could do full time just payment entering at this point in time.
absolutely.
So, are you finding that doctors are realizing this administrative burden, or are they trying to not that they're trying to overload, but I really feel like that's where the burnout is that our industry doesn't realize how these job duties have splintered so much.
So I think the plus is the younger dentists see it. The interesting trend, I will say, is the number one call I've gotten in the last 2 months of people that are possibly interested in working with me have been dentists that are out of school about 5 years, who would bought a practice, maybe under 10, and realize that they're not doing that part right and they never learned it and they're learning it on top of their
Yeah.
team. I think younger dentists are definitely more open and understand. The struggle comes into that dentist that's in that 45 to 60-year-old range that they remember it the way it was, and I don't think
Yeah.
they've realized, like you said. They don't realize how much that burden has happened. One of the ways I've explained it to some of them, because sometimes you have to get very basic, is how much more does your clinical team have to worry about for training and for OSHA and for HIP,
Mhm.
like all of those various things that have grown that we have to train on every year. The same kind of idea. Sometimes you have to bring it back to their own way of thinking.
What's the typical makeup that you see? Because you go into more offices than I do
Hmm.
at this point. So you go into an office, maybe three, four providers. Do you see two people doing insurance, three people doing insurance? Do you see at that point there's an outsourcing? Like, what are you typically seeing?
I'm seeing one very overburdened person,
Oh,
and I got called in because they need help. And I'm finding that outsourcing is a great idea with the right office and
of
with the
course.
right outsource. And I say that because one of the biggest things, I get a lot of phone calls from outsource gone bad,
Yeah.
because on top of it, they don't understand that just because you're outsourced doesn't mean there's nobody in the office that still has work to do.
Hmm.
And so that part gets lost. I think that I see a lot of two people handling insurance, one doing verifications, and that's all they do all day long.
Wow.
And then that other person that's entering. So that revenue cycle is almost ending up three people, depending on the size of the practice, because then you have to have that person billing. The AR
Yeah.
is not always the person entering.
Hmm.
And depending on the size of that practice, it's full time to get those breakdowns because they're so complex now.
Yeah. 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 It used to be so easy 80, 50, 180,
180,
50,
50.
deductible, never moved. I mean, it was just so
I know.
easy. Now it's so different. You got to look at Is it self-insured? Is it fully insured? Is it Medicare Advantage? Is it, is the person 6 feet tall on a
Yeah,
Tuesday?
right. I always say, do I have to ride a zebra backwards and do a flip off of it into the snow?
Yeah, it's gotten a little crazy. I think the billing company issue is starting to normalize. You and I know a lot of different billing company owners,
Hmm.
and it's easy to open up your own billing company, which is a blessing and a curse. So
Correct.
that's why you have some bad players out there. I think the majority of the people who open up their own companies, they want to do the right thing. But, if there's no barrier to entry, if there's no certificate, if there's no whatever, then how do they know they're supposed to have a dedicated HIPAA compliant computer that their kids don't search anything on? That's just scary stuff. And I know you and I have had those horror stories with clients where they've lost data or whatever. So there is, I think, a growing call for the insurance coordinator position to definitely be recognized and on its own. And I'm glad that you're starting to see that.
Hmm.
And I agree, the younger dentists are definitely seeing it. What are you seeing with participation? Are people in or out, or still, what are they doing?
They are jumping ship when they think they can, but they're not jumping ship on all. I'm
Okay.
seeing a lot of, I'm going to scale back. I'm tired of X, Y, and Z insurance for whatever reason. And it's not
Yeah.
always who you think it's going to be. I see others that want to be in everything because they think it's what's filling their schedule.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
most of it is I do get on average at least an email or a call probably 2, 3 times a month of, can you help us go out of network? Or do you have some pointers on going out of network? What I tell all the doctors is the same thing. Number one, you have to do it slow and steady. It can't be drop everything
Mm-hmm.
because that's not fair to anybody. And I also have a very strong conversation with the doctors typically if the manager is the one that says doc wants to find it out, because there are doctors out there that are not designed to be out of network. One of my favorite clients to work with talked about it, and I had to look at him and say, you cannot sit still. And if you go out of network with as many as you're talking,
Yeah.
you're going to do the same amount of work in an hour, and then you're going to have an hour to sit. And you're going to make your front desks crazy because they didn't fill this, and that's not you. So they have to think of it that way too,
That's
is,
funny.
but it was true. And he looked
Yeah.
at me, he goes, yeah, you're right. Like he totally knew it. I'm like, we can do this. You will
Yeah.
be less stressed. You will not have as many but you have to understand it's going to take time. And eventually you won't have those breaks, but there is sometimes, depending on how many they go out of network with, there's that break time that they don't always think about. And I've
Well,
watched it destroy some very good offices because the doctor's on the front and the hygiene, and oh my God, there's holes and there's hygiene holes and they stress out.
oh, you said the H word.
Oh
Oh,
no.
hygiene, man. I don't know
Uh,
how we're going to fix it. I don't even want to get on that topic. It's so problematic. It's funny that you said the doctor, because I thought you were going to go like personality wise, like as far as like, because you have to be a nicer person. You have to be very personal. Like your our now comprehensive evaluations, 90-minute comprehensive evaluations, you've got to be a people person. And there are
mhm.
doctors that they
Are
don't want
not.
to do that. They just want to work, 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 work. And
That's right.
that's what makes the world go round, right? Like everybody's different. But the lease networks, I think, are really what is pushing more. Honestly, I think that's why the temperature has gone up so much, honestly, in the last year or two, is the lease networks just got so convoluted.
Well, I think that combined with the H word that we said earlier of some of the salaries have gotten so high, these
Yeah.
doctors had to take a closer look at
Mm-hmm.
what they're really producing in that time. And when you are producing with a cleaning that's paying you 45, $50, which
Yeah.
I've seen it that low, and you have a hygienist that's making 45, $50, like they're looking at this going, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
And I
It's,
don't see the hygiene salaries coming down a whole lot. So
mm-mm.
they're trying to figure out ways to. I've heard a lot of doctors say everything else went up in cost and they haven't raised the fees.
Yeah.
Not a lot.
Well, I was talking to, I forget who it was. Somebody said they were trying to talk to they were talking to their Delta rep, the provider rep, and they said they based their 45 or $47 prophy fee on time with the hygienist being a half hour. And they were like, what? No, every appointment's an
Wow.
hour. And
Right.
they were like, well, that's what our numbers show. And I'm like, where's the numbers? What numbers?
They're
So I
not
thought that was
collecting.
pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where are they getting that data from? Who are they taking that from?
I have no
That's interesting.
idea.
I don't know
I mean,
anybody that does half hour profies anymore.
Well, because I mean, if you think about it, when has the industry even been surveyed on that? So how would
Right.
you, even come up with that? So I don't know. It is what it is. But the lease network issue, how do you see people handling that? How can you help them, like with some verbal skills, or how can you soothe the savage beast when it comes to
So,
that?
I'm big on everything being when you talk to your patients, this is an estimate. We do the best that we, our ability. If I know that it's a network that may have something leased, I may say to the patient, that my favorite line is the plan your employer has chosen,
Yep.
and then you smile. And I explain to them a little bit about it. The plan they've chosen is part of a network that could change what we think it
Mm-hmm.
is financially. I'm big on educating the patients as much as I can because they're more understanding when we get it wrong. They know we've done the research. So I go with honesty, and that's what I teach the team members of how to explain to the patient about their plan. Let them understand. The same as when, like I was talking to somebody the other day about dual insurance. That's a whole fun game. Be honest. I'm not positive. This is an estimate to the best
Right.
of our ability. And if something comes back different, I'm very sorry to the best of the information we could obtain.
So I used to tell offices, like, whenever you get a secondary insurance estimate correct, like both are correct, go buy a lottery ticket. Like,
Absolutely.
today's
Yeah.
your lucky day. I mean, even the best of us, you and
Yep.
I, we struggle with that. And then you add
Absolutely.
tertiary and forget it. Like, I'm done. So it's so hard. And that's not anything I went to high school for. Nothing was taught to me in high school and college about tertiary insurance.
No.
Stop it. So, what are you telling your offices to look out for? Is there anything on your horizon that you're worried about that you would like to put the word out about?
I think they have to watch the plans, the changes in the plans, especially some of the Medicare Advantage have gone down in benefits. So make sure you're really double checking at the beginning of the year and making sure it matches.
Okay.
Some of that is an issue. Paying attention to any new plans that hit the area because sometimes they become bigger plans, and even if they're not the best, you have to watch for some of that too.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
So you're
know,
saying, like, an employer that maybe gets more employees in the area now becomes a bigger part of your patient
becomes a
base.
bigger part of who you are. And the other thing is if you start seeing an increase in a certain type of plan coming in the door, it
Hmm.
means somebody down the street got out of network. And so you may have to make room for some of that or at least be prepared to be slightly overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's where it's great if you have a manager who's in a group or a study group with other managers because we kind of used to keep each other, hey, by the way, just so you know, I'm going out of net, like keeping track of those things. Or if you see, making sure your whole team gives you anomalies they're seeing. Hey, I'm getting
Hmm.
a lot of calls from XY for people with this insurance or this employer. That might be an indicator to something that's happening that you have to prepare for.
It is interesting when you have a office that decides to go out of network. Inevitably, another office will decide to go out of network, and then there's one office that's like, "What's happening?" And
Hmm.
now they're flooded. And even though they had previously, I've had this call last month, they had previously thought that their position with say United Healthcare, for example, was fine. Now all of a sudden, like you said, it doubled the amount of patients, and now they're in a more precarious position. And now they're
Hmm.
like, wait a second, and they're busy, they can't get people in. It's just, they didn't expect all that overflow, and they're kind of caught between being thankful and saying, well, great, everybody else is getting out of network, what about us? And then they start thinking about
Hmm.
that. So
Well, and I had an office that what they decided is they called up and spoke to the insurance company and they paused for new patients for 6 months. They said, we're swamped
yeah.
and we don't have room. Can we pause? We're not looking to go out of network, but we need to see if this levels off or at least
Hmm.
see who we still have and who's staying active. And they paused for 6 months to new patients. It is possible.
That would be a good time to say, hey, look how many more of your client base we're
Correct.
seeing, and is there any movement in the
Well,
fees?
right, and that's when you do. You hit up for the negotiations too. I had an office that was the only delta in 40 miles.
Wow.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely
Yeah,
get an increase in that, because listeners, these companies have to have a certain number of
hmm,
providers in
correct.
order to do business in a state, and every state is different. And if they don't, then any dentist they go to, they have to be paid at
Hmm.
the rate, the regular
Correct.
dentist rate. Even if they say no out of network benefits, they have to
Too.
allow
Yeah.
that. So it does make sense to keep that dentist happy, because if they lose that, first of all, the state may say you can't operate, or they have to change all of their plans to pay at a much higher rate. So you're in a really good situation in that. But then you're like, well, why don't I just go out of network? Like, why don't you
Right.
do that? So,
So I had a specialist that we had a local union that had no specialist within 50 miles. And the specialist insurance coordinator knew this. And so they were getting all the people sent to them and getting paid their full fee.
that's
There was nothing
great.
the insurance company could do because they legally, that labor union had to provide them within a it was a 50-mile radius, but
Hmm.
there was none. And so they
Well,
didn't go in network, but they just marketed to them and got to see the patients anyways.
in some areas, 50 miles is a lot. Like, I know you're in upstate New York. Here in
Hmm.
Northern Virginia, you throw a rock and hit a dentist, but
Right.
there are certain areas of Virginia where you can't find a dentist in that. So it's not hard to conceive at all. And if it's not a very industrious area, the DSOs aren't going to move in. And so that's a great opportunity for an independent dentist to, have the upper hand when it comes to fees. So one thing I wanted to ask you about is Medicare Advantage plans. I know you
Hmm.
love Medicare
I
Advantage
do.
plans. What's coming up with them? What do we need to look out for? What's your word on the street?
So what I'm thinking is there's going to definitely be some cuts to some of the plans. We did see some reduction in the number of plans offered in the states, and I'll be talking about some of that. I'm still gathering my data for the insurance extravaganza that's coming up in March. But I don't think they're going to go away the way some people think they will. There's definitely going to be a decrease, I think, in some of the maximums and some of that extended major work coverage, I think, is where they're going to probably cut. I'm hoping, and what I've seen so far, I've been hearing is the insurance companies want to keep them, and they
Yeah.
want to keep them as close to the level as they can, but we may see more exemptions, things that aren't covered. So we may get major coverage for crowns, bridges, partials, dentures, but implants are going to go away again. Things like that. You and I both know they only get a certain amount of money, and some of that money has been cut, and so they have to figure out ways to make it work. So I think we have to pay. We can't assume that the coverage, even if they stay with the same plan next year, we still have to. Those are the ones that I would look at with a fine tooth comb every
Yeah.
year
Yeah.
and make sure that we don't make any mistakes because your patients aren't going to understand them. They're dental's an add-on they barely even look at.
Well, one example of this, I was on a strategy call yesterday in office in York, Pennsylvania, and a patient had United Healthcare, had $2,000 yearly benefit. That same plan, he came in and he didn't realize that he didn't check. To your point, it was 850. The yearly benefit had changed dramatically, and he was like, "Well, if I had looked at that, I would have chosen another plan." But he didn't
Mm-hmm.
look at it, and the office, is not, they're at a network for him, so they weren't paying attention to that. I think the gravy train days of the Medicare Advantage plans are over because,
Mm-hmm.
when they first came out, they were very lucrative for the companies, and then tons of utilization, right? So they
Mm-hmm.
started realizing, okay, we need to price these a little differently. Right now, you have a lot of them that can go in and out of network. Do you
Mm-hmm.
think they're going to start doing more of the closed panel stuff?
I think they're going to try to. I don't think all of them will. I think your blues tend to stay in network. They like it that way, no matter whether they're traditional or the Medicare Advantage plans. I think
Mm-hmm.
some of the smaller companies in your, what I find is it's really fascinating when you look around the country because they're so different.
Yeah.
In my area, 3 years ago, they had a choice of 5 plans. They went up to 8 plans. They're down to 6 plans. So you're going to see less choices for your patient base. I think you're going to see them go from 2 or 3 options, and higher levels are just going to come down to two. It's going
Yeah.
to have comprehensive coverage or it's just going to be preventive.
Well, and
They
you like to
keep,
say something in your classes, which I think is interesting because comprehensive coverage is not what you and I think. You want to
yeah.
explain that?
So that was probably the most fascinating thing I ever learned, and I learned this from one of my friends from NADP,
Mm-hmm.
is who taught it to me, and he said, remember that comprehensive coverage means they only have to cover one code in the category. So they can cover a crown, so something in every category, but only one code can make it a comprehensive coverage.
Wow. Wow. Yeah,
And
that
that
is
just,
not what we think is comprehensive.
no, it kind of made my head explode.
Yeah. Yeah, that's called spotty coverage. It's not comprehensive. But you're right, though, because it is offered
Mm-hmm.
on the exchanges, on the Medicare Advantage exchanges, as comprehensive
Mm-hmm.
coverage. And when you're a person who's had a life of crown work, maybe needs dentures, like to you, you've probably had a comprehensive plan when you were working full time.
Right.
So it's to them, they think that's what it is. And then we're the ones that have to explain it. So, yeah, I remember thinking when I heard it explained, I was like, that's not comprehensive at all. What is
Mm-mm.
that?
No, but that's the legal definition for them to be able to use those terms. It has to cover one code in every category, and that's it.
Yeah, we need to change that legal definition.
I agree.
That's a little silly. With the Medicare Advantage plans, is there any best practices that you want to share for dealing with them or their patients?
I like to say, like I've taught in various webinars, is, go to Medicare.gov, learn what's in your area. If nothing else, learn what plans are offered and have a quick, even if you don't want to really deep dive, just have a quick cheat sheet of who has out of network if you're not in network with any of them.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to look at being in network, because so many of them, it's the same as the plan you're taking. It's the same as the PPO. There's like this misunderstanding that it's a lower fee schedule, but so many of them are the same, or in some cases better
Yeah.
fee schedule than your PPO. And so I tell people, don't be afraid to look at them. Don't assume that you're signing up to, sell your soul to the Medicare world, because that's not what you're doing. It's not, yes, they follow certain rules the same as Medicare, but you're not in network with Medicare itself. It's a separate agreement with that insurance company, no different than any other contract you've signed.
It's coming though, Colleen.
I
Medical
twitch. I
billing.
twitch. We
I know
twitch.
you and I are the same. We're kind of thinking I will definitely be retired by the time
Oh,
that
I'm
comes.
out.
Yeah. But there are people, Christine Texan, Leslie Eisnogel, Terry Bradley, really good at teaching medical billing. And so God
Yep.
bless. But but I do think it's coming. And I do think, I mean, right now we've got in July, if you are filing to Medicare right now, pediatrics, any of the ones that are doing Medicaid, like Medicaid and Medicare are different. But if you're filing to Medicare as a dental provider, if you're filing to Medicaid as a dental provider, these diagnostic codes, they're going to be mandated. So the Medicare piece is what is, I think, confusing people. And I know you know the skinny on that. Do you want to share a little?
Yeah. So, and I can tell you, I'll caveat this with there's someone else that we know who's kind of on the shorter level that disagrees with me on this. But the Medicare, the diagnostic codes are not necessarily going to be required by every single Medicare Advantage plan out there. It's somewhat up to an interpretation to that insurance company. The high level explanation of it isn't something I can spew off. It was a whole long legal I got from
Yeah.
someone from that I'm friends with who's high up. He's the government liaison. But basically, unless you're sending it on a 1500 form or sending it electronically on a medical form electronically, that's where the legal requirement for the ICD, the diagnostic codes, comes in.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's my understanding. And from what I've been able to research and talk to a variety of the reps that I know, even for Medicaid, that's how they're interpreting it. So
Yeah.
I'm not really sure. That being said, I think I do know that Humana is one that is going to be requiring it. We do have the codes. One of the things I was told that I found interesting that I talked to when I was talking to my friend was, if you put a code on, you have to have the right one or they have to kick it off. So I
Yeah.
know there was some talk of, oh, I'll just start sending them just in case. If they don't require it, don't do that, is
Yeah.
what I'm going to tell
Exactly.
you.
Yeah.
Because you and I both know that if, as we learn these things, we're going to get it wrong and you're going to mess it up. It's going to delay claims.
Yep.
So if you send a diagnostic code on that claim form, then it has to be correct, and then they have to process it that way.
And it has to show up in your clinical notes. Like, don't just
Correct.
play around with it, and say,
Nope.
hey, they need a code. So let me I think this one works.
Right.
It's got to be able, if there's an audit, I don't mess with the federal government or the
Mm-mm.
state government. It's got to be in the clinical notes.
No.
So the other side of that, so actually, let me go back. You said Humana, is it Humana Medicare Advantage is going to start
That's what
after?
I've been told. Now I have not
Yeah.
been able to. I've actually got a call out to a Humana rep. I'm trying to get it clarified.
Yeah.
I've had a few people in offices say that they're saying that, but I haven't seen it with my own eyes. So I'm still trying to get some
It's,
concrete proof of
yeah.
that. Like I said, the way that two of the companies, and they even put out a letter that I'm going to have a copy at when I speak on this,
Hmm.
that it states that it's because the way it's written, it has to be on that you're sending it on a medical form or sending it electronically medically,
Right.
then yes. But
Yeah.
if you're sending a dental claim form through your regular PMS system, through your clearinghouse, unless they're requiring it, you don't need to.
Yeah.
It's what
And,
my
and
research has shown.
And that's where, I mean, there's going to be guidance coming out. So I'm working with the ADA on this as part of a committee, and there's going to be guidance coming out about it. But from what you said is pretty spot on. The whole thing is with the fields on the claim form transmitting over to CMS. So the dental claim form is not a smooth transfer of information over to CMS, which handles the Medicare stuff.
Right.
That's that 1500 form that she's talking about. So if you're new to dental billing, CMS is Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Medical claims are billed on a 1500 form, and I know it as the red form because
Yep.
when we used to fill it out, it was red,
Red in
right? And even
color.
the
Yep.
online versions are still red.
Yes, they're still red.
So it's the red form. And the dental form, which you should be using 2024 by now, version 2024, there's diagnostic code fields on there, but it's not always a lock that it transfers over to the medicine side because there's got to be corresponding data fields. And that's why it is a good idea to bill. If you're going to bill medical, use the red form because the chances of it transferring, and that's really the big issue, is these dental carriers, they're not set up to take our
Mm-mm.
medical forms. And even if they need to transfer it over to their medical side, there's no clear path for that. So it is very confusing and something that we're going to have to figure out.
Right.
Or they're going to have to
Absolutely.
figure out. You and I are just going to tell people about it.
Yeah. We're just going to teach them.
Yeah, we don't have to worry about that. Okay, so you're putting together a class because you're just as passionate about teaching as I am. And so let's talk about it because I want people to know what you're going to be teaching on, how they can get it.
Well, thanks. So yeah, I'm going to be starting a training modules on my website. So if you go to colleenhuff.com, it's really hard to remember. Um,
Two F's, two
two
L's, two
two
E's.
L's, two E's, two F's at the end. Yeah. And I'm doing kind of a mini intro to a dental insurance. So it's going to be, I think I finalized on 9 modules, and it's going to cover things like some of the terminology you run into in dental, breakdowns, entering of payments. I touch on EOBs. I touch on dual insurance. One of them is going to be about EFT setups. And then
Good.
just kind of a general, if you're an insurance coordinator, what are some of the roles and what are you doing in it? It's not a deep dive. This is definitely an intro course. Eventually, I want to have more in depth of each of some of those sections. Still deciding if I'm going to do one giant course or if I'm just going to have more mini courses. Some of the idea eventually is going to kind of be you might be able to almost build your own course.
Yeah. Oh, that
Kind
would
of
be
pick
smart.
a little from column A, a little from column B. Part of this came from I get a lot of people saying, I just want to learn about this.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to learn dual insurance. I'm struggling with our office. My doctor wants me to set up for EFTs. And
Yeah.
that's sort of where it came from. I used to have a full course at Front Office Rocks. I'm now kind of doing it all on my own. So that's where
Mm-hmm.
this is coming from.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I think it's good too because now you have the flexibility to quickly add something if you want
Yes.
to, and are you going to have ortho? I would have something on ortho.
Yeah, you keep telling me
See,
that.
I
I
know.
will.
See?
I know ortho some. You do know my background in ortho, right?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so I thought I told you this. I
No.
actually grew up around dental. My father helped start Great Lakes Orthodontics, which is
Oh,
one
I
of the
did know that.
largest ortho. Yep.
Yeah.
So I grew up around ortho. And when I first moved back to Buffalo, he desperately tried to get me a manager position in an ortho office. My least favorite part of insurance is ortho insurance.
Mine
I'll
too.
be honest. And so I
Yep.
told my father, and I could have been set up with some of the most amazing practices in the area.
I bet.
And I
Yeah.
said, thank you very much, Dad. No.
He's like, oh man.
But God
But
bless him. Every time I speak, and he has nothing to do with insurance, he was on the sales end of it and development of various things that Great Lakes now sells. Worked for Reliance Orthodontics for years, but he comes every time I speak and he's in the audience when I'm
so
local.
sweet. That's
Yeah.
awesome. That's
Yeah.
really awesome. My dad would be asleep in my classes, I'm sure. So good for him.
I will say that the first time I spoke, he stayed the full 3 hours, morning and afternoon. This
Hmm.
last time he came for about an hour and a half.
So with that, the reason I bring up ortho, and it's funny, you and I, we just, and like Amanda Demora, she loves it. Like there's
I
people that love it.
know. I
It just
know.
doesn't float my boat. And when I get calls about my class, the number one reason that I have to say, oh, sorry, is because they say, do you do a section on ortho? Like, no. And I've been yelled at, like, why do you not? It's so easy. Just put it in,
Yeah,
like by friends saying, just add
I
it in.
guess
But
I should.
oh man, it just doesn't do anything for me. So,
Well, my problem with ortho is what I call my dental home when I was in New Jersey, the office I spent the most time at. We had an orthodontist, and so, but she was part-time. And
mhm.
so I had to deal with ortho part-time. And my problem was I'd have this beautiful treatment plan and I'd have everything all figured out. And they'd have dual insurance, of course. And I had it down to the penny. And everybody was making their payments. And then a new year would come in and they'd come in with new insurance.
Oh my gosh.
And I had to
Yes,
do it
you're
all over
right.
again. And
You're
that's
right.
where it's not that I don't understand it. It's not that I don't like it. That's where that thought of managing a practice and doing that full time, God
Yes.
bless anyone who does. I think you
Yeah.
guys are fabulous
You know what?
because,
I think you hit it on the head because that really was my biggest issue with
mm-hmm,
ortho was the change in coverage. And
mm-hmm,
yeah, I got to the point where we would do ortho on adults and I would be fine.
mm-hmm.
But ortho on kids, and our office didn't do it. It was whenever I consulted, I would be like, oh,
Yeah, no.
So Colleen, we're going to have you do an ortho class. Maybe I'm just
Okay.
saying, okay.
I could do it. No, I could find the good in it. I definitely, and I do, when I do coding, I do a section on ortho. I do
Okay.
go through that because I feel like that I do know that there's parts that offices are missing out on. They
Yeah.
don't code correctly.
That's true. That's
Um,
very true. It's so
so,
funny because there are certain parts of what we teach that we don't love.
mhm.
And it's funny when you get a bunch of us together, you'll hear like, oh, I will never talk about that. And oh, I will never talk about that because that's
Yeah,
exactly it. It's just like clinical assisting. There's parts you don't want to do it. So, insurance coordinators, if you're like, man, I don't like this part, maybe don't try not to do it or outsource that part because
right.
then you can focus on the stuff you do love, like the clean. I used to love cleanup. I used to love treatment plan
Hmm.
presentation, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, when it came to ortho, I was, ugh, no. So they're going to find it on ColleenHuff.com. Your
Hmm.
book is on there too and on Amazon.
My book is on there and on Amazon.
And you have a
Yeah,
newsletter. So sign up for the newsletter.
I have a newsletter that
And
I've
then
been,
reply to the newsletter saying, Colleen, where's your course on ortho? No, I'm
there
kidding.
you go.
Um,
I'm gonna get flooded, Teresa. So now you're okay. So now maybe that'll be my next standalone course. Is
yeah,
I'll
I
work
will
on one for ortho.
I will
Um,
sell the hell out of it for you because I don't have that course. I don't want to teach it. And for those of you that are in ortho and you're listening, I'm not trying to come down on you. You
Not at
guys do a
all.
great job, but it's just that the world that makes me kind of go, what is going on around me? So it's just there are other people who do it better. So
Yeah.
that's you know, go for it.
Well,
So
maybe I can come up with it before the AAO and go with my dad, which is the American Association for Ortho conference, and go with my father to that conference at some point, which he missed for the first time last year in like 50 years. And
oh
he's supposed to be he still goes. He's been
yeah.
retired for 12 years now, but he still goes and works the booth.
You load him up with some
I
brochures
will.
and
I
he
will.
will market you to
Oh
death.
God, yes.
Yeah,
He
that'll be
brags
great.
about
Dude, I
my
might
book.
send him some brochures.
He brags about my book all over the place. It's
Well,
so
and
fun.
one thing that's been fun is you joined me in my membership, Dental Revenue Network.
Hmm.
So thank you for that. And
Thank you for starting it. It's amazing.
I'm loving it. And I think the reason why I bring that up is you've been so helpful in helping like share some of your knowledge in there. And it is hard nowadays. Facebook is interesting. Other
Hmm.
areas are interesting. Do you have advice for someone? Maybe they're not a member of DRN, not yet, but do you have advice for someone as far as how to find the information? Do you tell them to go to Google? Do you tell them, is there one particular source? Is there a resource other than your book and my book that they should have on their desk? Like, how would you set somebody up to really start absorbing the knowledge?
So, well, I tell them to get newsletters from those that I trust. I tell them to follow you. I do name certain others in the industry like Rick, those that I trust. I then tell them somewhat to watch for who you guys may mention also.
Yeah.
I've done that because then it's reliable. I would say at this point with that, if they're able to do the membership for the revenue,
Dental Revenue
the
Network.
dental
Yeah.
revenue network. Sorry, it's not flowing
That's
yet.
okay. No, you know it as DRN because that's
I
all you
do.
see
That's what's
on the
always going through my
login.
head,
Yeah.
DRN. I think I'm going to be really encouraging people to that because I know the people that are there, the information is going to be accurate. I tell most of the people that I talk to stay away from at least definitely Facebook and
Hmm.
those experts unless they know who those people are, unless they've seen them speak
Yeah.
or seen an article in a legitimate publication, to please not just listen to everyone who says they've been doing something for 25 years.
Right.
Because unfortunately, part of the other reason I started teaching was I did work at the insurance company. I also heard, as you said, we learned from them. I heard bad advice given. I can remember jumping up and flagging one of the women down on a regular basis who was giving out wrong information.
Yeah.
And so you could have been doing something wrong for 25 years and you didn't know it. And you think
Hmm.
it's that way. So I'll encourage people to follow. I would use LinkedIn as more legitimate sometimes. And I try to gear them towards following those who they see from those that they know. I tell them if they haven't heard them speak or seen them speak or see a comment or something from you or I or some of those others that we trust, to be leery of it. Google is okay, but
I think the budget has to include a code book every year,
oh,
right? The
absolutely.
ADA's coding companion. And I think that really scares me when I see people saying, what's the code and can
Oh,
anyone tell me how to code this? And the answer would have been right in the code book. So just caveat, if you're looking at the membership, if you're a newer biller, it may not be for you because it's a little bit higher than just what's that code or how to figure out a deductible. This is more like strategy, really mastering the revenue cycle part of it. So when you're ready for that, yeah, jump in. We're all in there. But I do think at minimum, you have to have a current code book, the coding companion guide. And there's so much nuance behind the codes. Like you and I go to the code maintenance committee every year. We're going to see each other there this year in March.
mm-hmm.
And that is where the ADA holds all these stakeholders together and they pass new codes, revised codes, deleted codes. So when you get that list of updated codes every year, people, that's the meeting that we go to because we want to hear the reasoning behind. And that's what helps us teach, you guys. And so I think it's been really wacky lately. The amount of code changes coming out and the amount of revisions that have been happening. Are you surprised by that? Like how many changes are just honestly just edits? I'm seeing a lot of edits.
It's the edits that I find fascinating, but it also helps me when I'm teaching them. Like I had one of my offices, we did an update. They missed yours, and
Hmm.
she wanted one-on-one, so we did a one-on-one update, and which I still tell everybody to go to yours, go listen to
Thank
it.
you.
Um, Part of what it helped me when I was explaining to a couple of the women who have never even like this office didn't have updated code books from, they were 3 years behind when
Wow.
I first went in. Which, by the way, if I ever come in and consult in your office, you better have a current code book. Otherwise, you're ordering one that day with the coding companion
Yeah.
and hopefully the app just because it's fun. By having some of those edits, it was able to explain to them how much nuance does go into that and how one of the things I had to explain, I had a disagreement with the doctor of who was responsible for the coding in the office,
Oh.
and he has been very strong on his admin team should be having final say of everything.
Oh
And
no.
I tried to explain very nicely and tried to get through to him that you did the work, you're in the room, you have to understand that they can't always make that
Hmm.
nuanced decision. And there's been codes, I mean, I called you on one with a doctor that they were doing the custom, some of that nuance comes into play. And that's where I
Yeah.
think a lot of those edits are coming from,
Yeah. Yeah.
that we
So
have to pay attention.
yeah, and the code, whenever there's a change in the code or a deletion, I always ask why. And usually it's at those meetings that we will get the answer for it. So, but it's one more thing that we have to keep on top of. And that's why it's okay to say this is an overwhelming job, ask for help, take some
Absolutely.
extra CE, relax a little bit, get a massage, and then go back to your whatever spreadsheets you're working on. So give them your website and any dates coming up this year that you want to plug.
Yeah. So, well, my website, like I said, is ColleenHuff.com. You can reach me. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. I have a page on Facebook, which is Colleen Huff Dental Insurance Coach. If you want to follow me there, I post a lot of where I'm going to be on that one also. Sign up for my newsletter. I've been much better at doing it monthly.
Yes,
Now
you have. Yes, you have.
I'm been monthly. I have a whole routine with it. It's not a huge in depth. I do some key points. I'm trying to keep it short and sweet because I know we don't have a lot of time. I will be at the Insurance Extravaganza. I'm not sure if this will be out before that or not in March. And then I will be at Charter Oaks in Connecticut with Teresa
Yep. Yep.
at the middle of May. I think that's the 14th and 15th of
Something like
May.
that. Yeah, in May we're going to be at the ADOM Insurance Symposium
Yeah,
together
and then
too.
I had them reversed in dates. Yeah, the
Yeah.
ADOM Insurance Symposium in Virginia, which
Yep.
is on the 9th.
9th and 10th. Yeah, if
10th.
you're a Dental Revenue Network member, we're actually having a billing breakfast on Saturday. So feel free to come. Colleen and I will be there. So if you want to talk insurance over bacon or whatever. But
Yeah.
you'll also be, I think there's something else that you were going to be at later this year. I know you're doing the SkyGen thing. And
I'll be at ADOM.
ADOM.
I'll
Yep.
be at NADP, and then I'm also going to be at. I just found out I'll be at Greater New York.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I possibly will be at the St. Louis. I'm still figuring that one out.
Yeah. Oh, the
Possibly in
Mid-Continent.
the
Yeah.
Mid-Continent.
That's a good meeting. Yeah.
I'm
That'll be great.
hoping.
Yeah.
I'm hoping,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Well, fingers crossed.
fingers
Yeah,
crossed.
people are going to see a lot more of you. I mean, you're getting more and more well known for your courses and for your knowledge. And so, I remember I'll say I knew her when. And,
You did when
you
I was
know,
sitting in your class absorbing it all.
it's something though, like it's really cool to feel like maybe I kind of push this out like new billers. But here's the reality, Colleen, and this will happen to you. Somebody said to me, I remember you were the first insurance class I ever took when I started dentistry. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I love you. And that's so sweet. But man, it was just a woof,
Yep.
so yeah, but we're getting there. And I guess that's a sign of a good career. And it'll happen to you too, Colleen, where somebody will be like, I remember. And,
yeah. Well, it's reached a point of there are people that come up to me and say they saw me speak and I can't tell you where I saw them. They may look familiar. Like when you first start speaking, you remember them. You remember them. I don't always remember. And sometimes, especially at the ADOM meeting, forget it because you've seen them from all around the country.
Yeah.
And, some of them I saw them, though, ADOM chapters are some of my first speaking engagements. And so we're going back to 2015 and, you're talking 10 years ago. That's,
yeah.
Oh my God, it's 10 years. Yeah.
I know. It flies. It really flies. So
are you a dental biller feeling overwhelmed and isolated? I get it. The world of revenue cycle management is complex and ever-changing. That's why I created Dental Revenue Network. Our membership community was created to help you become a better revenue cycle manager and small business operator. Say goodbye to feeling alone and hello to a supportive community of dental billing professionals. Here's what you'll get: monthly billing-focused meetings with peers and experts, business building sessions to elevate your career, resource libraries tailored for billers and billing company owners, introductions to cutting-edge RCM technologies and companies, and a vibrant community for networking and support. Ready to transform your dental billing experience? Visit dentalrevenuenetwork.com today. Don't wait. Join us now and navigate the business of RCM with confidence.
All right, dear listeners, so you will find out all about Colleen in the show notes if you missed any of that, but definitely check her out. She gives really good information. One of my resources as well. It's true. We text each other all the time. What is this? What is that? What is this? So it's very helpful because even though people see us as knowing the answer, sometimes we have to do the detective work too. So it doesn't stop. It just doesn't stop. So thank you so much for being on. And dear listeners, I always want to thank that you spend your time with me.
We're all super busy, so thank you for making time for me today. The show notes will have any links that we referenced in the episode. You can also find links for my book, events, and my online insurance course, Dental Insurance Design and Management. I speak often around the country on management and insurance issues. Come hang out with me in one of my classes. I promise you'll laugh and learn.